Hello and welcome to the AK Compass, where we explore new directions in travel and sustainability. I'm Carolina Zacco, communications and sustainability expert with a decade's experience living abroad and an insatiable passion for discovering new places. I'm joined by Agnes Gardonyi, an accomplished journalist who regularly explores the intersections of travel and sustainability.
On this show, we uncover inspiring stories from around the globe and bring you honest, insightful conversations on travel, sustainability, and current events, always with a non-political, open-minded approach. We welcome individuals and experts from all backgrounds to share their experiences about journeying and living beyond borders.
Our sponsor is the Sweet Home Studio. Their services help us make this podcast possible. Their mission is to bring important social topics to Hungarian audiences. They also give new podcasters a special price to support more valuable content. They are based in Budapest, offering full technological support and a great space to make podcasts. We would like to take this opportunity to thank them for supporting our work. In this episode, our guest is Gábor Heves, an expert in sustainable urban development and mobility with long-standing experience at the intersection of environmental policy, cities, and transport. After many years at the Regional Environmental Center, he now leads sustainable urban development work, focusing on practical solutions for cities and regions. He will talk about sustainable mobility, how we move within and between cities, how technology and planning can cut emissions, and what this means for our everyday choices.
Welcome to our show. How can AI technologies like real-time route optimization help reduce urban CO2 emissions from transport?
Hello, nice to be here. Thank you for inviting. And as I see, we start with a quite difficult question, but no wonder you start with AI. Nowadays, AI is everywhere, so no wonder that I think it makes absolutely sense to kick off with this question. Many of us know, for example, the web-based, GPS-based route planners that they use in your cars. So actually, the car industry has been the very first to embrace all these new technologies, including AI-based technologies. The thing is that other sectors of mobility, like public transport or cycling, walking, other applications, also use AI. Maybe it's not that trivial for us, and they are unfortunately a bit lag behind the car industry. But there are some good examples I could name. For example, just think about all those scooters, the shared mobility solutions, scooters or bicycles. At the end of the day, you end up with stations where all these scooters are moved to different locations. So there's a little bit of, I wouldn't say chaos, but relocation. And AI can be very useful in handling this situation and learn from the actual usage patterns. So I think in shared mobility, this is a good example that I could mention. A second good example I would like to mention, it's not urban mobility, but still interesting to me. It's the recently launched Emergency Response Center of the Hungarian Railway Company, the National Railway Company. The purpose is to handle emergency situations, troubles. Let's say there is an accident in one part of the system or any problem. In such a situation where the system is so extremely complex, you need to handle employees, the conductors, the railway engine driver, all the people. You have to communicate with passengers. It's a super complicated situation. And AI is very useful to oversee this situation and to speed up the process. So passengers don't need to wait that much in the train and worry about delayed trains.
Thank you, Gábor. How can decision makers and transport experts encourage people to combine modes like bike, walking, bus, and train instead of relying solely on cars?
Well, I think they have to bring in convenience into using all these options. We call them multimodal, so multimodal ways of mobility. Convenience is very important because what we're competing with is cars. You sit in your car, you have your heated seat, you have all those conveniences, AC, everything. So the alternative has to be convenient. And how to make multimodal traveling convenient, how to make all these options easy to use. One good example I would say is ticketing. You buy one single, let's say you travel to a different city. You buy your train ticket, and that ticket is valid for the metro system or for the tram nowadays it's quite frequent. This makes it much easier for the passenger. Or if you have an online portal and you can do all the travel arrangements in one go, so you don't need to worry about all the other options. Just like when you fly, you get the options on your ticket purchase page. Same thing is possible to do in urban mobility as well.
Can you tell us about some examples where this works? This system that you have to buy just one ticket for all kinds of transportation.
Actually, if you travel from Budapest to Vienna, this is the case. And Austria is a good example. They have introduced a national ticketing system, which makes it really easy to go from one city to the other. And it's also financially extremely competitive.
Moving on, how do private car ownership and car sharing compare in terms of usage patterns, costs, and environmental impact? In your opinion, how personal vehicle use might evolve in the context of broader mobility and sustainability trends?
Well, when we look at these two private cars versus car sharing, let's say, the usage patterns are quite different. The mobility mode is similar, so you're using the car, but the pattern is actually very different. Um, when you use your own car, you use it, let's say, for 1 hour or half an hour, but anyway, for a short time in the day. And what does the car do in the day? It parks. It keeps on parking and it keeps on taking up space, at least 8 square meters per car or 10 square meters.
Also taking up money
And takes up
because
money if you pay for parking.
and insurance and various other costs.
And a lot of times you don't have to pay for parking, but you take up space from other things people can do on those spaces. So yes.
But even this issue of cost, what you say, is very tricky because many of these costs are hidden costs. For example, you have to purchase your car, you have to purchase your insurance, you have to have it fixed. And often people just ignore all these costs, tens of thousands of euros people like to ignore, and they compare just the fuel price with the price of the train, let's say. I think it's a huge difference. And if you compare with car sharing, it's the same situation. When you book your car sharing service, you pay for everything. You don't need to purchase the car. You don't need to buy the insurance. You just purchase for that one particular trip. So I think this is also very big difference. And the other thing is that your personal car keeps on parking. It just keeps on parking. But when you use car sharing, it's used much more efficiently. So these cars keep on moving.
And it's not used like an extended purse or bag or an extended personal space because I think also people become territorial a little bit about their cars. I don't know if you agree with that.
Yes, I think mobility is a reflection of our culture. And we keep on demanding more and more private space. So I think mobility is a good example for this. And it's a big question, how far can we go?
How can cities design better connections between bikes, buses, trains, and ride sharing to make multimodal trips the natural choice?
Well, I would give an answer in two parts. First is infrastructure. So you can certainly spend billions and billions of euros. The limit is the sky. One way is and certainly there is no question, you have to have a high quality system. The other leg, the other part of the equation is actually information. Because in our projects, we found very often that even if there is a good system, even if there is a high quality system and an attractive system, people don't know, or people have misconceptions, or they have these beliefs, or they have assumptions. So it's all these subjective things. So what I would argue for is that on one hand, you need to focus on creating a great system, no question about that. But on the other hand, you have to communicate and persuade people and use the emotions.
What's the most common disbelief?
For example, metro is unsafe. Don't travel on the metro at 10 p.m. And surveys show that actually there's no deal. I mean, it's not any unsafer than any other place. Or if you ask people where is the nearest bus stop, they will say, oh, it's quite far. And I mean those people who don't use the bus. And it turns out that actually it's closer than that. Or if you ask about the intervals, they will say, oh, it takes so much time. And in reality, it's less. So people tend to underestimate, to more negatively estimate the travel options. if it's not their own car.
Yeah, actually, once I had this experience where I left an event with my neighbor at the same time, and she drove home, and I took public transit home, and we met at the elevator.
That's funny. Yes. Even in Budapest, I think last year, almost every year, they make some competitions how quick you can get from point A to B, and very often the cyclists are very competitive with cars.
Yes, because you have to count in the time when you search for parking spaces into the time they get there.
Indeed, and when we talk about design of cities, I think a good example that many of us already see is that train stations are turned into mobility hubs or service hubs. More and more often, if you go to any big city, you have the shopping mall, you have the post office, you have the restaurants. I think this is a good example that railway stations are no longer just train stations. They are really multimodal hubs where you can park your bicycle, where you can rent scooter, you can get on the train, you can do your services.
How can data-driven tools and shared services help shift habits toward lower emission travel in the coming years?
Well, to answer this question, probably we need to see why people decide for a means of mobility. What is their motivation to use a mobility tool? And I would say probably the number one reason, among other reasons, is journey time. So if you can offer something that's fast or even faster than their cars, I think we have a strong case. But we shouldn't forget that there are other options, other considerations as well, like convenience or the habit. You have the car key at your door, you just pick your car key, even if it's a worse option, so we always need to look at these personal considerations.
Yeah, what I would like to add is that when I used to live in Sweden, my boss used to take the train. He lived several hours away from our workplace, and he was able to work. So he was able to work during the travel because he took the train, and he didn't have to focus on driving because he was being taken to his final destination. And in that way, he was able to leave on earlier on a Friday, come in later on a Monday, and that really helped because he was able to manage his own time and his own work time. And I think that's also something to point out to professionals who are deciding on what mobility version to use.
Mm, indeed. And it's funny that often we argue with costs, what is cheaper, what is more expensive. But in my opinion, in our experience, cost is getting less and less important for people when they make a decision about their travel options. Almost everyone has a car. So it's not really about cost, it's about convenience, it's about habits, it's about journey time, and it's about emotions. Don't forget that when the car industry wants to sell a car, you have beautiful women showing the car. In the ad, the car is driving in a beautiful location, never in a traffic jam, you know. So the same way, when we want to promote sustainable urban mobility, we also have to play with emotions. We also have to make it attractive, and sexy.
Yeah, and also this decision has to be made a health issue as well, because if we use less cars, everyone gets healthier because the air pollution gets lower and lower. So this is something that I don't think people see now, but this is another thing we have to talk about a lot, that
Mm.
it is a health issue, whether you use your car or not.
And it's a good point that when I see children using the e-scooter, I mean, e-scooters are a great thing, but when children stop walking and instead use the e-scooter, I start thinking.
And to your point about health, last December I was at a conference and they spoke about how people who live near larger roads, they have a higher predisposition to dementia and to various other problems because of also the air pollution and that kind of background stress that somehow also affects the body. I'm not a medical expert, but it was very interesting to see that these people actually collect data on rough locations of people and then their illnesses later in life.
Mm.
Our next question is, what innovations in inner city travel, like optimized rail or bus networks, could lower emissions without sacrificing convenience? What do you think, Gabor?
Well, convenience. I think convenience is the key word. I think I already mentioned that if you have integrated ticketing, you have one single portal. You want to go from point A to point B. You go to one single portal where you get all the answers, you have all the tickets. I think this is the way forward. So I think that's a good example. And once you get on board, you have to have the conveniences as well. AC for sure, and Wi Fi. Nowadays, no travel without Wi Fi.
And bathroom, clean bathroom is also very important.
Clean bathroom, indeed. And actually, this is when we talk about Generation Z, but actually now this is valid for all generations, that Wi-Fi becomes often more important than let's say owning a car. So if the question is, should I drive and pay attention on driving, or should I sit on the train and use the internet services? Many people go for Wi-Fi, go for the internet.
It's a very interesting point.
And also, if you can rely on the schedule of the train, that's really important that you know that you will get to the destination you want to. So, infrastructure, a functioning infrastructure is also a key in every kind of transportation.
Indeed, I can tell you my example. I live in the suburbs, and there's a suburban railway line which I use. It's somehow slower than driving, not in peak hours, but out of peak hours, it's a bit slower, but super reliable. And for me, this reliability is more important than saving, I don't know, 10 minutes.
That's an interesting point.
Yeah, actually, I also used to work in Szentendre with Gabor at the Regional Environmental Center. And I had the opportunity to read many books because I just got on the suburban rail and then I had 40 minutes there, 40 minutes back to read or do work or even attend like online conferences because there were some that were with an organization from a different time zone and I didn't have to stay in the office because I was able to concentrate on that. So there is a case to be made that convenience and being able to use your travel time for something else is a very good option instead of driving.
In cities with a strong and developed public transport, do people with higher income also use it regularly? And if so, what factors influence whether these people use developed public transport or not?
Certainly, first we need to look at what is the service, what is the quality of the service. And in many prestigious cities like Vienna, Berlin, Tokyo, great cities of the world, you have really high quality service. There's no question about the service itself. So once public transport, let's say, is used as a quality service, and it's not a kind of social net, like with strange people hanging around, or you're worried about your safety. But once you have a really nicely well done system, it's positioned differently, so it becomes attractive to higher levels of society as well.
Yes, one thing that is a property of developed public transport can be if you can see people in suits on a bus or on a metro. For example, I was very surprised that I have a neighbor who always wears a suit. I don't know what he works, but he goes in a suit to work, and he used the bus, and I was so surprised, and I was so glad that this happened in Budapest. So yeah, this is something that we can see in New York or in Vienna, for example.
You can also see it in London and in Stockholm. I actually had a boss who asked not to have a company car because it was more difficult to drive in Stockholm than to use public transport. And then also, as I said, my other boss also used public transport. And in London, actually, as you said, Aggie, people with suits, well dressed people, it's completely normal for them to even use trains and then tubes and then the tube and buses to get to work because in London, which is one of the largest cities in Europe, has so many cars that it's just a bigger hassle to drive instead of using public transport.
People in suits can use bikes as well, and they can also use electric bikes and as an alternative to cars.
In London, one of the biggest banks did sponsor a bike system. So I did see this bike sharing system working in the middle of the city at the richest areas as well. People use them a lot. So you have a point.
And you may have seen those photos called cycle chicks. Do you know cycle chicks?
No, I haven't heard about that.
These are kind of promotional pictures of people on bicycles in fashionable clothes, like well-dressed people in suit and tie, so it's called cycle chicks, and it became a kind of subculture. I think it's also a good example to put a emotional aspect into promoting something which is just mobility, so to say.
Yeah, that sounds like a great communication tool.
Finally, Gabor, in your opinion, what changes in mobility, like AI planning or mobility as a service, might make transport more sustainable in the future? If you could please summarize that.
Well, multimodal traveling is the keyword. What is important is to get from point A to point B, and how you do it. That's question number 2. So it's no longer you just get your car key, but you think about the so-called travel chain. We also need to be very careful with optimizing car flows. People often talk about making the car use more efficient, easier, better, faster, quicker. We need to be very careful with that, because in the end, experience shows what you achieve is even more traffic. So I would really focus all effort, and especially taxpayer money, to public transport, walking, and cycling. And be that technology like AI assisted solutions or a lot of communication. We need to keep on communicating.
And educating people. Gabor, thank you so much for participating in this episode and for sharing your vast knowledge and experience about this topic. And I really hope that our listeners will rethink how they are going to use various mobility options from sustainability perspective, but also an efficiency perspective. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
That was it for today's episode. You've been listening to the AK Compass, guiding listeners through evolving ideas and directions. I'm Karolina Tsako.
And I'm Agnes Gárdonyi. Subscribe, rate, and review if you'd like to support us. Thank you for listening.